Welcome to the Growth with AI podcast, hosted by Integrated AI Services. I'm Peter Martinson, and today's episode dives into how artificial intelligence is reshaping creative strategy, brand development, and the way agencies deliver value. Our guest is Jef Loeb, founder and chief creative officer of Brainchild Creative, an agency known for building powerful brands through disciplined thinking, sharp storytelling, and results driven creative leadership. Jef has been exploring how AI can enhance but not replace the craft of strategic creativity. Jef, it's great to have you here.
Thanks. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. So tell me how you got started doing what you're doing now.
Well, if you really wanted to go back into the deep, dark secrets, what you'd wind up with is that I misspent youth led me through the pathways of going to law school, which I hated from day one, working in the legislature of California, politics, and then working and get sort of bootstrapping my way into advertising on a redacted number of years ago. More recently, a brick and mortar agency in San Francisco called Katz and Loeb, and we were about 50 people and $50 million. And when the dot-com thing started to happen, I started to look around and think, are there better ways to approach the advertising business? We were a traditionally organized agency. So my business partner, who's also my wife, and I decided to start Brainchild Creative. And what we essentially do is we are a project agency that works by building bespoke teams from national level and international level talent. And that's resulted in us doing everything from a global rebrand for a big unit of Hearst Corporation to hyperlocal brand building for Chevron in California to a national campaign for energy products for a consortium out of Washington, D.C. So it's a broad spectrum of clients. A lot of work in healthcare, a lot of work in financial services, a lot of work in automotive and leisure and travel, and you name it, and a lot of work and I think, a unique focus in public affairs.
Wow. Well, I have to say, I think you're the first guest to use the word redacted in this podcast. There's
They will
that's
redact
your
that in post-production.
so there's a kudos to you. So yeah, it doesn't sound like you have a niche at all. It sounds like you really work all over the spectrum.
Well, our particular point of view is that every project is unique, every client is unique, so the requirements to essentially achieve their objectives are unique. It's not really a rocket science, and that's led us into, PG&E is one of our larger clients in California, the electric utility,
Mhm.
and a lot of what we do for them is SEO, search engine, and that's actually kind of what's led me into the world of AI, actually, in a unique way.
Interesting. So speaking of that, can you talk a little bit about AI tools that you've brought into your agency and just broadly where you use them from the creative process to admin work to something else?
Well, let me caveat all this by saying that I am call me on team skeptical about AI, or maybe what is it? What's the state? What's the show me state? Team Missouri or whatever it is. I believe AI. There's an extraordinary potential for AI, but it's not a 100% sure potential. It's pattern recognition technology. It is limited by its training. The models they're having have their own foibles and quirks. It's not just hallucination. If you read about the evolution of ChatGPT 5, they went through two models before they got to it because there was a big sycophancy problem, which is saying it was trying to flatter its way into keeping users engaged longer. Natively, I find the output is a mile wide and an inch deep. And I did two tests recently. One test is I had AI tell me whether or not it could produce a ad on the order of the legendary lemon ad for VW. And it said, well, you can use AI to get to interesting concepts. The answer is no. That kind of disruptive thinking requires human intervention. The second test I did with AI was to say, how many people does it? Well, let me rephrase this. What I asked AI to do was, what is AI's error rate in producing a specific output against a couple of different categories? Then I said, what's the human error rate in those situations? So a legal document or a creative brief or a statistical analysis. And then I said, what will it take for AI to get to a commercially acceptable error rate? And then the third question, I said, how many people does it take to make sure that doesn't happen? And essentially, long story short, AI told me that to get to error-free performance, it's 1-to-1. You need, for every bit of output, you need a human being looking at it. Did that work for you? I mean, tell me if that made sense to you.
Well, it makes sense. I am curious. So I looked at your LinkedIn profile, and there was you'd made a post about a lemon.
Yeah, absolutely.
Was that in reference to that
So
lemon commercial?
yeah, there was an ad for VW, launched basically VW as the brand it was, and it was through an agency that is now being folded into the new Omnicom, which is a tragedy, but that's a whole different story. But the DDB did this ad called Lemon, and what it was a picture of the VW, which, as you recall, is kind of an ugly bug, and it said Lemon, and the whole point was that there was a flaw in the thing, and because of that, it wasn't acceptable to go out to market, and they had to fix it. And it was sort of the brief for that particular car was, in the agency, was that it's an honest car, be honest about everything, including that it has its flaws and we'll fix them, and that it's improving and it's a work in progress. So that was absolutely, I mean, bear in mind the context of VW after World War II. It's a German car that was essentially pioneered and built in Nazi Germany, and suddenly they're trying to bring it to America and tell people this is the car you want. So what they did is they absolutely went counterintuitively, and they said, we are a car with flaws. We're a car with human beings attached to it. We are a car where our pursuit of perfection is relentless, but we realize that we always have a way to go. And so that came up with this ad lemon, and it absolutely disrupted it. It totally blew people's minds at the time. And, here we are 50 some years later, 60 some years later, and that campaign is still in the conversation. So I asked AI, could you produce an ad, essentially, if I translate that, could you produce an ad that 50 years later will still be in the conversation about advertising and marketing and what we're doing? And the answer was no. Which was, somebody commented back on that post, and I said, well, that's a remarkable bit of self-awareness from AI that I didn't expect.
And if it just said no, that's also remarkably succinct.
Well, it didn't say just no. It's caveated a lot. I think, frankly, between you, me, and the audience here, I have a hunch that a lot of what AI is being trained on is PR, because you're seeing a lot of subtext and context in output that suggests that they want to persuade people that AI is not a threat.
B, absolutely.
Anyway, so this dialing back to your question, long way around. Essentially, my view is, and there's real reason to think AI is going to get more powerful. But then again, every technology gets more powerful. I mean, if you look at the origin, the connection between computer generated graphics in cinema to what, the origin of that, when it first came out, it was very flawed. It got better and better and better. And I think AI will get better and better and better, although whether or not we ever get to AGI, which is artificial general intelligence, which is supposedly human equivalent or not, is really a matter of some doubt. And I've been reading some skeptics on that as well. We use AI principally research. We use it for helping suss out facts that might be helpful in understanding a category, understanding a client problem. We use it occasionally. We'll use it to trial balloon a copy concept, but I don't really. It's more of a checkpoint. Did we not think of something that would come out from a pattern recognition? I mean, pattern recognition is great if you are replicating the pattern or replicating the past. It's not so great if you're trying to find an entirely counterintuitive, new, disruptive way of thinking about something. And since we live in incredibly challenging times from a standpoint of message overload and marketing and the challenges clients face, that I view AI as a aid to judgment, not a replacement for it.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. One of the things that I've found is useful from the research perspective is telling an LLM to look for unusual sources when I'm researching a person or a thing, and it'll come back sometimes with news articles written a year or two ago about somebody that I never would have found on my own, and so that it does help with research, absolutely.
Well, I think, I mean, I'm mindful of the hallucination problem with AI on that issue. I mean, it wants to please you. I mean, that sort of seems to be the new thing, and that can lead in some fairly catastrophic directions. I don't know if you read about the law firm. The guy filed a brief that AI had written for him without really checking it, and it was using citation. And he said, make sure the sites are defensible and you make sure that they can be proven. The AI still went ahead and threw it and made up some quotes and put it into the brief, and the judge was not happy.
I
So
can imagine.
I think you have to take everything with a grain of salt. Having a tool like AI does not mean we can abdicate our responsibility for what the actual final result is. It means we have a higher level of responsibility because we are using a tool that has its own known quirks and foibles.
Yeah. Do you ever find or do you ever think that the amount of effort it takes to go back and fact check the research is more effort than if you had simply done the research yourself?
Uh, well, I'm not in the I'm not with the things I'm using AI for really are not going to be where a lawyer is going to look at it and scrutinize it for that kind of thing. I'm not going to do that kind of use AI because I don't trust it that far. Um, I don't think it's an excess. I don't think it's, if I see a quote that bothers me or see a fact in there that gives me pause, I'll go check that out. But by and large, I'm asking it questions like, tell me everything you can about the travel and leisure with a specific focus. What's the context? Writing as a travel expert, tell me about vacations in the South Seas, that kind of a thing. And it will give me what it knows. And I find that useful because it gives me a sense of what it's telling, not only what's out there in the world, but also what it's telling other people about those, if asked that same question.
Yeah. Okay.
So
All right.
it's called sentiment analysis.
Mhm.
And I do think that I think is going to become increasingly important, particularly as we get into the world of AI agents and more and more people are asking AI for recommendations, but that's a whole different issue. Here's a little sidebar for you. We are going to have the point in the near future where AI will be a notable segment within the marketing universe that you're trying to communicate with. And I've done so for years. I mean, this is for 5 years, going back 5 years. I have made Google a brand persona when we do a brand persona analysis
Mhm.
for that reason, because I realize so many people are going onto Google to do the search. If they find something that they're interesting, and Google will point them in directions to follow up. AI is going to be that on steroids, and Google knows that. That's why they're launching so many new AI products. So you have to be mindful. This is going to be an intermediary between the advertiser, the marketer, and the audience, because the audience is going to increasingly ask AI for its opinion on things. So who are we advertising to now?
That's an excellent question. I don't think anyone else has actually brought that point up, so I'll have to make a note about that.
It's going to be in the near future, we're clearly going to have to deal with AI recommendations. Google is introducing the come on. I think it's a come on, but I think Google is introducing AI summaries at the top of most searches.
Mhm.
And the reason they're doing that is to get people hooked into using AI and looking at those recommendations and becoming dependent upon them.
Yeah.
And then they're going to monetize that. So I think we have to bear in mind that as agents become more frequent, more prevalent, whether it's a question answering agent or it's an agent I rely on to restock my pantry when I'm low on dishwasher soap, that's going to become an increasingly important issue. I'm of the mind that humans will retain agency in this situation, that there will always be a need to communicate with the end user, decision maker, purchaser. But I am also mindful there's going to be this new layer that we have to be communicating with.
Sure. Now, does that go along with, you mentioned search engine optimization at the beginning? Does that agent engine optimization, does that play into the idea that you now have to advertise to the AI itself? Is that part of AEO?
There's yeah, and it's all right. So let's go with that. There's a midpoint, and my search guys. I'm not a technical guy. I'm a creative guy, right? But I listen carefully when the search guys, who are also the AI guys, start talking. There's a midpoint. So we're at search engine optimization, and we're moving to answer engine optimization. which will be how do I get AI to say the most favorable things or to report information back that I want my audience to get to. The next level will be agent engine optimization, and there will be a need to communicate in ways that the average that will the I will read the LLM will read and process the information in the way that I want. But what's interesting is this is not like flipping a switch. And my search guys, AI guys are very careful to say it's going to blend. We're not going to lose SEO particularly that fast. We're going to move into AEO as a blended proposition. We'll move into the agent world as it evolves. So I think we have to be mindful of what's coming without anticipating its adoption is going to be faster than sort of you would expect in a normal technology adoptive situation.
So I'm reading a book right now, and I don't remember the name of the author, but it's called The Shock of the Old, and it's a book that sort of timelines significant technology changes through the last 150 years, and how in World War One, which was already after the invention of the airplane and the tank and the car, that the Germans actually still had an enormous number of horses that most people would have thought, well, by World War One, who's using horses anymore? But yeah, the whole book is a discussion about how technology does not immediately replace everything everywhere like a light switch, like you said.
Well, one of the concerns I have with AI is it's overhyped, and I
Mm.
think that the hype it's on a hype overdrive, and that's leading just to some unfortunate consequences. Coca-Cola did a has taken its famous the trucks are coming through the small snowy village, and they redid it with AI,
Hmm.
and it was substandard, at least from my eye. And I've been reading a book called Chairman of the Board, BORED, where he spends 10, 15 pages ripping that and saying that while people do not, the data doesn't show that people are noticing it, the subconscious notices it. And the fact that it's a driver with five, 6 fingers is coming through. So there is that overhyping thing going on. There's also you talk about the shock of the old. There's also a historian named Jim Meacham who talks about the narcissism of the present, which is people thinking that what's happening now is oh so different, oh so much more
Hmm.
challenging, oh so much harder than it was for previous generations. I think the adoptive cycle on AI it will follow the general, history does not repeat, it rhymes, as Mark Twain said.
Hmm.
And I think what we'll find is that rhyme here is that we'll see the traditional technology adoptive curve, which means we got to get over off we're going to have some kind of a down tick because technology always goes through the adoptive abyss, and then we'll start ramping up, and whatever that next step is going to be is what reality will be, the long-term reality.
Yeah. So just going back to that Coca-Cola commercial. So I've heard that there are 10 different changes to the axle configuration in the trucks during that video. And part of me wondered, did somebody just not pay attention and they just released the ad into the wild? Or did they know that the flaws were there and release it, hoping people would see them and then talk about it a lot, which would keep the ad in the front of the public discussion longer? And I don't know which way to look at it. I don't know which is the right way to look at
Well,
it, but I do wonder.
I strongly doubt that conspiracy theories are always welcome here, but I strongly doubt that Coca-Cola made a flawed ad for that reason. I would imagine. Now, I'm not privy to information. I know of some of the people who did that work, and some of them have very high creative standards. So, I'm sure they were aware that there were those kinds of issues. Film always, and I'm putting on my film director's hat here. Film always there's always gaps because the human eye and the brain basically makes things kind of bridge. If you think of every frame as separate, it's running at 30 frames per second. The mind, the brain connects it. So if there's a flaw in there, and if you look at polls, you'll see the different trucks, and you'll see those. What you heard is absolutely correct. There's a lot of different ways, and the trucks are different in some different ways, and the people are different in some different ways, and whatever. The question now, there's some data out there that says that nobody notices, but they don't care. There's an argument that that commercial is so well embedded in consciousness and so well loved that people ignore those problems. There's a counter argument that says people may not see, may not comment on that, may not tell a researcher, "Oh yeah, I saw all those flaws," but still don't feel as good about it as they might have otherwise. All of which is by way of saying that I mean, I worry that if we see a decline in creative standards and we accept more and more errors in the creative output, and we rely on AI too much and accept and just say, "Oh, people are going to be they aren't if they don't notice, it doesn't matter." Well, it does matter. People I think are smarter than a lot of people. A lot of AI evangelists give them credit for, and I think they're going to notice a lot more than they're telling a data collector on the subject.
Interesting. Okay. Well, this has been a great discussion, but I think it's time to start wrapping it up. So before we go, though, what would you like people who might hire you to know about you and your agency?
Well, we as I said to you before, we're project oriented. We build our project teams around the specific project and the specific client needs. Now, some of those projects have lasted 14 years, so go figure. PG&E being one of them. I think the thing to know is we're creative. We believe in creativity, which is not necessarily everybody in the marketing world these days. We believe in the intelligence of the audience. We're really curious about how things work. I mean, I'm always fascinated to meet a new client, new business, and figure out how it works, at least try and get a handle on how I think it works. And so that really gives us, I think, a point of differentiation from people who are there, particularly in project agency world, who are just there to solve a specific thing. And, it's about performance and how many clicks did you get and all that other stuff. We're engaged we're here to engage with really difficult problems in interesting categories and make it fun to work with along the way.
Fantastic. Well, that's a great philosophy and a great way to run your business.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we didn't talk about AI in media, but maybe we'll do that some other time.
Yep. Well, I'll call you back in a year and we can talk about
Terrific. Or I'll
changes and
put my media director on with you, and you can deal with it. You can deal with her on that issue.
maybe we can do that one as a long form podcast and go for an hour
Sure.
instead of just 25 minutes.
Absolutely.
Well, Jeff, it's been a real pleasure. It's been a fascinating discussion. We'll definitely reach out to you and talk to you again in the future.
Thank you so much.
All right. Take care.